Thank you. I am Rabbi Gerber. I am the rabbi at Congregation Beth in Maple Glen, which is about half an hour from here. Has anybody ever been there? Yes?
I've heard of Bethel many times, and my stepmother and little sister are both Jewish, so I'm pretty sure we've been there longer times.
Very nice. Any Jews here? All right. I could sense the Jewish aura. So I'm here to teach you about Judaism, what Judaism is all about. It's a very old religion, so it's hard to cover it in a short time period, but I'll give you the basics. Let me ask you, what do you know about Judaism? Yeah.
They have a Torah, which is similar to the Bible. It's basically, the Bible actually has the Torah in it, and they don't believe that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. They're still waiting for the Messiah.
Very good. So we have a Torah, which we're going to see in a minute. The Torah is the first part of the Hebrew Bible. And the Hebrew Bible is one of our main sacred texts. And a big separation between Judaism and Christianity is that Christianity has a New Testament, which is the story of Jesus. Judaism doesn't have that. What else do you know about Judaism? Very good. Yeah? Hanukkah. Hanukkah is one of our biggest holidays that actually has very little religious meaning for us, but because it's near Christmas and we want our kids to feel like they have a fun time too, it's become a very big commercial holiday for us. Very good. What else?
When I'm over at my dad's house, we can celebrate Passover. I know Passover is basically when the Hebrews were in Egypt, and it was when they were trying to escape Egypt, they were back in the slaves.
Very good. So the book of Exodus describes a time when the Hebrews were slaves and God and Moses delivered them to freedom. We celebrate that through a holiday called Passover every year, where we have a Passover dinner, Seder, where we eat matzah. Very good. So I've heard a few things. So the first thing mentioned was the Torah. You might have heard Jews be referred to as the people of the book. Well, that's the book. Torah is the book. There is a difference between Torah and Bible. Torah is part of the Bible. Who's heard of the 5 books of Moses? What about the Pentateuch? Book of Genesis? All right, so we're getting somewhere. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, those are the 5 books of the Torah, also known as Pentateuch, also known as the 5 books of Moses. They are shared by many cultures. And for Jews, they are written down in the Torah scrolls. I need a few volunteers. Anybody want to volunteer? Coming up. Give me a couple more. Coming up. And yeah. So, stand right along the stage. So the Torah scrolls are entirely handmade and handwritten. They are written on parchment. Anybody know what parchment is?
Paper, it's like old school paper.
Old school paper made out of?
Plant.
It's pre-plant paper. It's animal skin. It's handwritten by a scribe. It takes a full year to write a Torah scroll. Every letter has to be perfect. Every word has to be perfect. There are 600,000 letters that are spaced exactly the same in every Torah. The Torah scrolls are valuable. They cost anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000. So be careful when I hand it to you. This is a replica. It's a fake Torah. Don't worry. So hold the wooden part at the bottom, and hold it at the top also. And grab this right at the top. So yeah.
I promise I didn't do it.
It's okay. None of you ripped it yet. And I'm gonna have you hold the wooden parts. Okay. So what does it look like?
The book.
This is, it is. It's a book. If we were to continue to unroll it, it would probably go probably around all of us, maybe a little more. It is, well, does it all kind of look the same to you? So a lot of it looks the same. These spaces are done intentionally. So the columns have to be the specific width. So if you went to any Torah scroll in the world and you opened it to this spot, you'd have this space right here and this space right here. They're all the same. And that works throughout time. So has anybody ever heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls? So the Dead Sea Scrolls were found by a Bedouin shepherd about 70 years ago. He was trying to scare one of his sheep out of a cave, so he threw a rock in and he heard the rock shatter glass. So he went in there and he found scrolls just like this that had been hidden for 2,000 years. When they opened them, they found that they are identical to what we read today. The Torah has not changed. There are some little parts that have specific, this looks a little different than what's next to it. This right here is the Ten Commandments. A lot of the parts, when it's a significant moment, they're kind of illustrated in a certain way that makes you kind of stop and take note of what you're reading. Jews read from this scroll, not this one because it's not a real scroll, but they read from a Torah scroll every Saturday for the community. If you've ever been to a bar or bat mitzvah service, when every Jew turns 13, to become a bar mitzvah, they read from this for the community. If you come to a service every Saturday for a year, you'll hear the whole Torah. It takes a full year to read it. In this Torah, you'll find the stories of Judaism, of our history, and it's a very sacred right to be able to read from the Torah scroll. Most of them are bigger. At our congregation, we have, I think, 9 or 10 Torah scrolls, including one scroll that is about 400 years old, and it was rescued from the Holocaust. So it's one we were very careful with. If this were an actual Torah scroll, we wouldn't be touching it because it is made out of animal skin. So the oils of our hands can mix with the parchment and the ink, and it can smudge the ink. If any letter is smudged in the whole Torah, then the whole Torah becomes unkosher. But fortunately, just like we see that they're taped together here, a real Torah, it's not one big long scroll, it's a bunch of pieces of paper sewn together to be a scroll, so you just have to take that one page out, repair it, and put it back. Any questions about this guy? Yeah?
So that's like the Bible?
Good question. It is, it's not the Bible, it's part of the Bible. So in a minute, I'm actually going to pass around the Bible, and you'll get to see how it's a little different. So hold on to the question, we'll get there. Yeah?
Did you say, where it was first written?
Good question. Where it was first written, who first wrote it? That question, and I'm going to let you guys sit down because it's, I can answer that without the visual aid.
My legs are getting tired.
Thank you, guys. By the way, if you drop a real Torah scroll, anybody want to guess what the punishment is? You have to fast for 40 days. Now, it's 40 days, it can be done communally. So if it happens in your synagogue, one person doesn't have to fast for 4 days. You can assign a day to 40 people, or even half a day to 80 people. The question was, when was it first written? That question is what determines what type of Jew you are. So you might have heard that there are more than one type of Jew. Have you ever been able to see a Jewish person and know they're Jewish just by looking at them? How? Beard, wearing black, curly sideburns? Okay. Those are Orthodox Jews, and they believe that the Torah in its entirety was handed to Moses by God at Mount Sinai after the Jews left Egypt in the book of Exodus. I am not wearing black and don't have the curly sideburns. I'm a Reformed Jew. I believe that the Torah was man-made and divinely inspired. So the Torah, there's good evidence that it was written over a period of several hundred years and redacted and put into a final form that we know today. What we do know is the Torah as we know it has been the same for probably 2,800 years. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Archaeology hasn't quite given us the answer. The oldest part of the Torah that we can kind of corroborate archaeologically is from about the 7th century BCE. They found a necklace with scripture from the Torah. Yeah?
So it's written by just like regular people?
The actual scroll?
Yeah.
To write a Torah scroll, you have to become what's called a sofer, which is basically the Hebrew word for a scribe. And there's a training and a school you have to go to become a sofer. So only Torah scrolls can only be written by sofers. Yeah?
Who was the original people?
The original. The best way I've heard it described is an author named Pedikovsky. And he said that the Torah is best described as a history of the Jewish people's interaction with God. So not necessarily that there was one author who wrote it, but that it was communally written and communally accepted. In fact, you can see in the last couple hundred years there have been a lot of studies that show that there are certain words that are from this century and other words that are from this century. It really is kind of a collaboration of cultures. Good questions. Let's get back to the Bible. So this is the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew word for it is Tanakh, and that word Tanakh is it's an acronym. So every letter in Tanakh stands for something. The T stands for Torah, the N stands for Nevi'im, which means prophets, and the Ch stands for Ketuvim, which means holy writings. These three things together make up our Bible. If you are Christian, you know this is the Old Testament. If you're Catholic, it's the Old Testament minus Maccabees and Jubilees. But it's the same. The Jewish Bible ends at Chronicles, whereas the Christian Bible picks up with the New Testament. The Jewish Bible does not. The first section of the Hebrew Bible is the Torah. It's exactly what's in this scroll, but it's in book form. We read this in our services, but we study from this. I'm going to pass this around. This is the Hebrew and English Bible. You can flip through it. You can see that on every page you have the Hebrew and the English translation. Yeah?
So that Bible is the Old Testament, exact same words as the Christian Bible?
Well, here's where it gets a little tricky. Anytime you read a translation, it's also an interpretation. So, for example, what did Adam and Eve eat in the Garden of Eden that made them sinful? An apple. If you read the Torah in its original text, you'll find out that it was not an apple. That it says perot, which just means a fruit. And with a little study, you'll learn that apples didn't grow in Israel or in the Middle East until relatively recently. The apple came from a Greek translation. So yes, it's the same, but most Christian Bibles come from the Greek translation, which changes a couple things. Not changes, but translates it a little differently. One of the things that as a rabbi, I can read and speak Hebrew. Hebrew is the original language of the Bible, so it's easy to go in and see. If you don't know if it's an apple or a pomegranate, then you go to the Hebrew and look, and you see that it just says fruit. It doesn't say specifically. It's one of the things that if you ever want to really, study Bible. The Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, was originally written in Hebrew with a little bit of Aramaic. When you study the New Testament, you can get more into it if you can learn Greek. The oldest you can go back to the original language, the more true of a study you get to the Bible. Yeah.
Is that Bible read right to left?
Yeah, so that book opens right to left, backwards. If you were looking at an English Bible, it would go left to right. You can see the cover page, even though it's kind of worn. Hebrew does go from right to left. Anybody know why Hebrew goes right to left? It's very, yeah. It's because of the writing. So how did they write back then?
Left hand.
Were people, any lefties here? Some lefties. Do you know how many lefties there were back then? Yeah, none. Why? That's right. Has anybody ever heard the word sinister? You know what that means? Anybody know what sinister means? Evil. Do you know what it literally translates to?
Left hand.
Left hand. Dexter, sinister. So there was an association with left-handedness and evil, so everybody was right-handed. So they trained people to be right-handed. I don't think that anymore. I think my daughter is left-handed. She's one. We don't know for sure yet, but she seems like a lefty. She's also a troublemaker, so maybe there is something to it. But when people wrote, they weren't writing with pens on paper. They were etching into stone. And if you are etching with a hammer and a chisel, then you're holding the chisel in your left hand and the hammer in your right. And if you try to hammer and chisel from left to right, you can't see what you're writing. So if you turn it and go right to left, you can. So all the Semitic languages, all the languages that began when they were hammering and chiseling, go right to left. Try it sometime. Pick up a dry erase marker in your next class and see what happens when you try to hold it like a chisel and write left to right. Good question, wherever that came from. Bible, right to left, Hebrew. Okay, so Hebrew is the language of the Jews. Hebrew has been used for millennia. Biblical Hebrew is a little different from modern Hebrew. And has anybody ever heard of Aramaic? What do you know about Aramaic? It is a language. Anybody know anything else about it? So Aramaic was the kind of spoken language of the Jews about 2,000 years ago. That's a very important time in religion. It's about when Christianity started up. So if you saw Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, the language of that movie was Aramaic. That was the spoken language of Jews. In fact, Hebrew wasn't really a spoken language until the state of Israel was founded about 70 years ago. Hebrew was always the language of study, the language of prayer. Aramaic was most commonly the spoken tongue or a previous version of it prior to that. But we still speak it today. And the reason is because Hebrew really unites Jews everywhere. The prayers that we do in our worship are in Hebrew. So if I went to, actually 2 weeks ago I was in Israel, and I was at a Shabbat, at a service on a Friday night, and I had a very difficult time understanding the sermon from the rabbi because he was preaching in Hebrew. But the prayers I understood. The prayers never change. I could go to Hong Kong, I could go to Australia, I could go to Brazil, and I'd understand the prayers. I could time travel 2,000 years ago and I'd understand the prayers. That's what makes Jews Jews. It's what connects us. Our cultures vary, but our prayers and our Torah stay the same. So, I said Jews are people of the book. Let me show you a couple more books. The Torah scroll, 5 books of Moses, the Bible, which is going around, contain kind of the basic information about Judaism. If Torah is the most sacred book in Judaism, this is a close second. This is the Talmud. Has anybody ever heard of the Talmud? Yeah?
I don't remember much about it.
Gotcha. So the Torah gives us laws. One of the laws, who's here heard of Shabbat or the Sabbath? Right, so the Torah tells us to rest on the Sabbath. Take a day of rest, make it holy, and observe it, and cease from your work. And it even says that if you don't keep the Sabbath, you can be punished by death. So it's a very strict punishment. What the Torah doesn't tell us is how to do it. It doesn't tell us how to pray, what rest really means, because rest is very different for people, very different people. So, like, what do you like to do to rest? Sleep. Does anybody read? So, if reading is restful to you, what if you were an editor for a publishing company? Then all of a sudden reading is work. Are you not allowed to read on the Sabbath? These are all questions that Jews have, especially with such a strict punishment. So the Torah gives us the laws. The Talmud gives us the details. How to do it, what prayers to say, what constitutes work, what doesn't. And not just for the Sabbath, but for all of Judaism. This is book number 4 of 72. So imagine 72 of these books side by side, and that's the whole Talmud. I'll pass this around. You can see that each page of Talmud kind of looks the same, very complicated. But from inside out, every page has about 2,500 years of Jewish discussion and law on them. It starts with Aramaic in the middle, and as you work your way out, the language changes and gets more modern. So I'll pass this around to take a look. All of Judaism that we practice today in one way or another comes from this Torah and that Talmud. Questions? Yeah?
The day of rest is for Jews, I know it's on Saturday, correct?
The Jewish day of rest begins Friday at sunset and ends Saturday at sunset. The Jewish day always begins at sunset. That comes from the book of Genesis. At the end of the first day of creation, it says there was evening and there was morning, a first day. So the Jewish day is defined by evening and then morning. Good question. A couple other books I will show you. The prayer service is done out of what's called a siddur. And I'm going to pass 2 around. This siddur is from Israel, so it's entirely in Hebrew. This siddur is from New York. It's very old. It's about 100 years old. So it's Hebrew and English. These are the ways to tell us how to pray. So if you go to a Jewish service, I'll start this one at the back. You will see that there's not a lot of free-form prayer. So has anybody ever said grace before a meal? Yeah. Do you say the same thing every time? You don't have to. So I'm part of a wonderful group called the Wissahickon Faith Community Association, which is made up of rabbis, and priests, and pastors, and ministers. And every week a different person takes turn saying the blessing before we eat lunch together. And when you go from all the pastors and ministers, it's always a beautiful prayer about fellowship and togetherness. But every time it's a rabbi's turn, the prayer is the same. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Blessed are you, God, who brought food from the earth. For Jews, prayer is fixed. We have a prayer for each time a day. We have a prayer for if you're sick, we have a prayer. If somebody has died, we have a prayer. Jewish prayer is always the same. We don't do a lot of free-form praying. At times we do, but it's very rare. We do this because Jews are very scattered, and if we keep our prayer the same, it keeps us together, even though we might be separated. Yeah?
What kinds of situations would you have?
Good question. What kind of situations? So a lot of them have to do with life cycles. So if I go to visit somebody at the hospital who's on their deathbed, there's a deathbed prayer. If somebody's going into surgery, there's a prayer. If there's a new baby born, there's a prayer. There is a prayer for just about everything. But it is, for Jews, they wouldn't kind of look in and say, what am I feeling right now? They would say, what's the prayer for this? And there's actually a good story about this. You heard of King David?
Yeah.
So King David in the Bible had a lot of trouble having children. He lost a lot of children young. And when he finally had one and his baby died, he said to God, Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi nagid tehilatecha, which means, God, open up my lips so that I can declare your praise. Meaning that King David was in such despair that he did not have words to pray. That's why our prayers are written out, because in times of sadness or pain, it's hard to give words of praise to God. That's why we don't leave it to ourselves. We hope that we give it the intention, the kavanah we call it, to say that we say these prayers with our hearts. But even in times when our heart's not in it, the prayers are written down for us so we can say them anyway. Because even though we might be feeling more faithful or less faithful, if we declare the words of praise in any time, it'll work. Yeah.
So you guys believe in God, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's the difference between Christians and Jews and Christians?
Good question. So what's the difference between Christians and Jews? The real answer is very little, especially in terms of theology, in terms of belief in God. Christianity began actually as Jews. So Jews during the time of Jesus believed Jesus to be the fulfillment of the biblical prophecy of Messiah. And the Jews who believed that followed Jesus' teachings and became Christians. And the Jews who didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah remained Jewish. That's where they branched off. The big difference between Christians and Jews is the belief in Jesus as Messiah. What does that mean in terms of how we believe in God? Not much. There's a big difference in practice. So for example, Jesus in the New Testament came and fulfilled much of the Old Testament, which means that you won't find Christians keeping kosher or doing Passover seders or celebrating Hanukkah. There's a whole new set of practices. So the practice is very different. But the belief in one God is very similar. You'll find the prayers differ in that, you, depending on what type of Christian you are, you will pray in Jesus' name, whereas Jews don't. But they're both monotheistic religions, meaning they believe in one God. And one of the best ways you might be able to put it is think about the United States Armed Forces. So we've got the Army, the Navy, the Marines. They're very different from one another. They even don't get along sometimes, but when it comes down to it, they're all fighting for the same flag. Yeah?
Do you have all the prayers memorized?
No. I don't have all the prayers memorized. In fact, the Talmud, which is going around, tells you that even if you have prayers memorized, you're still supposed to look at the words when you say them. And there's a good reason for it. I was leading a service once without a prayer book, and I was playing a song on the guitar, and playing a prayer and singing it. And it's a prayer I'd probably done 10,000 times, and it just escaped me. Couldn't think of the next words. So even if you know the prayers by memory, you're still supposed to look at the book. Good question. Any other questions for now? There'll be more time to ask. So what do Jews wear?
Always called
We call these a couple things. We call this a yarmulke or a kippah. Yarmulke is a old Yiddish word meaning head covering. Kippah is a Hebrew word meaning head covering. They come in very traditional styles, the black and blue. Anybody a Doctor Who fan? So that's, if you'll notice on the inside of that, you can see there's an inscription. The ones I'm about to pass out are from people's bar and bat mitzvahs. A lot of times they like to have personalized yarmulkes. Anybody a baseball fan? Football? Ah, yeah. Tennis? Tennis fans?
Oh yeah.
Anybody? Give me an excuse to throw one more yarmulke. Pretty good. Jews are never bored because we have frisbees on our heads. So the yarmulke is it's a sign of respect. Has anybody ever worn a baseball hat to a baseball game? What happens when you sing the national anthem?
Take it off.
Take it off. So in our culture today, it's a sign of respect to remove your hat. Back then, it was a sign of respect to cover your head if you were meeting somebody or if you were going into a place you needed to be respectful. So the yarmulke is a practice that came from a time where it was courtesy to cover your head. Most Jews will wear a yarmulke when they worship, when they read from the Torah. I wear one when I teach or when I pray. I don't wear it all the time. Questions about the yarmulke? There's a clippy thing.
I was confused about that.
It's always the first question. There's a clip that keeps it on there. Yeah. That's always the next question. The answer is, I have no idea. I do not know how bald people keep their yarmulkes on. I have theories. Double-sided tape, maybe. Thumbtack. So some Muslims wear a keffiyeh, which is a head covering. The Pope wears a yarmulke. It's not called a yarmulke, but it's common practice among several religions to have your head covered. Yeah.
Why is it courtesy?
It comes from a different culture. So it comes from a time when it was when it just was. It might have to do with the fact that people weren't as clean. They couldn't shampoo every day, so covering your head was a way to be cleaner. Good question. Yeah, you guys can try them on if you want. I've yet to have the courage to ask a bald person how it stays on their head, but I will one day. I've only been a rabbi for a couple of years. There's time for me. Any other questions about the yarmulke? Yeah.
Why don't you just wear like a bigger one then if you're going to cover?
So some people do. So there are people who wear ones that go around their whole heads. There are some people who wear like top hats or fedoras. There's no right or wrong way to cover your head. As you can see, the yarmulkes come in different shapes and sizes. So the point, if you were wearing actually, there was a kid who came to services right from a baseball game, and his mom made him take his hat off, and I actually told him, keep your hat on. It's more respectful to leave your hat on, so he wore a baseball hat. There's really no wrong way to cover your head. Good question. Yeah?
Does everybody do it, or is it just like...
Good question. Does everybody do it? It's tradition for men to do it. In synagogues like mine that are more liberal, everybody's welcome to do it. We require, if you're reading Torah, that men wear them, and women can wear them if they want. Done? You could have thrown them back and tested your yarmulke frisbee skills. Yeah?
What do you do as a rabbi?
Good question. What do I do as a rabbi? The answer is a lot. No 2 days are the same. The best example I can give you is, thank you. I'll tell you what I'm doing today. In the morning, I am teaching world religion at North Penn High School. After this, I'm going to a council meeting of local rabbis. After that, I'm meeting with a family who has had a death in the family, and I'm talking with them about their funeral. After that, I'm teaching a Hebrew school class to 6th graders. And after that, I'm teaching a class about supernatural occurrences in Jewish history to adults. So it really varies. The things that are steady is every Friday night I am leading worship services to begin Shabbat, and every Saturday morning I'm leading services that are usually bar bat mitzvahs. But it's very common for me to have funerals and baby namings, to visit people who are sick, to counsel people who need counseling, to teach, to do work with other churches and synagogues in the area. It really depends on the day. which is one of the reasons I really like doing it, because no 2 days are alike. Yeah, good question.
I might be asking, like, is a rabbi like a job or is that like a hobby type thing?
Good question. It is a job. It's a job that requires 9 years of school. So you have to have an undergraduate degree, and then rabbinical school is 5 years long. And I am, for example, I'm under contract with my synagogue to be their rabbi. I serve a congregation. And you'll find other rabbis. So there are rabbis, for example, who are kosher butchers. You'll find rabbis who are moils. They're the ones who perform the circumcisions. There are rabbis who write Torah scrolls. But I'm a congregational rabbi, which is very full-time. Yeah?
You get paid.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I do get paid. It is it's not a job where, like I live at the synagogue or in like a rectory or something. I am salaried, and yeah, it's a good question. 5 minutes? Really? Went fast. Okay. Yeah.
Do you like know you wanted to be a rabbi?
No, I had no idea. I decided I wanted to be a rabbi when I was in college. I actually knew so little about Judaism that as the only Jew in my circle of friends, I got frustrated. People would ask me, and I never knew. That I started researching, and in researching, I found a love for Torah. I had a whole separate career in finance before I became a rabbi. Yeah?
During the Holocaust, how do people keep their faith?
Great question. She said, during the Holocaust, how do people keep their faith? I don't know, but I know they did. It's one of the things that, I was fortunate. Number one, I wasn't alive yet, and number two, my family was already in America by the time the Holocaust happened. But there are great authors. Elie Wiesel is somebody to read about the Holocaust. And, there are people who will tell you that that faith grows stronger during times of suffering. And it's something that I've seen. I've had a lot of kids ask me, why do bad things happen to good people? I've had a lot of kids ask me, do you really believe in God and heaven? But, when I visit people who are close to death, they never ask. Those are the people who always have the most faith. So I don't know. I've been fortunate not to experience great suffering personally. But, the hope is for Jews that you bless God in the good times and the bad times enough that you kind of build up a good amount of faith to get you through the tough times as you do the good. But I highly recommend, if you want to know about how Jews experience the Holocaust, there's the Shoah Foundation. You can go to the website and you can listen to what survivors had to say. Hear it from them firsthand. There are still survivors alive today in this area. There are plenty in this area who would talk to you if you wanted to. And it's not going to be long before there are no more survivors alive. So do it while you can. Yeah.
I saw a survivor, I heard one talk at a synagogue, and I was wondering, if you ever have done that, heard one.
Have I ever heard a survivor talk? I have. I have, and it's amazing to hear the stories. It's heartbreaking sometimes, it's uplifting sometimes, but it's one of the most important things Jews can do. When my 13-year-olds come and talk to me about their mitzvah projects, their acts of charity they have to do before the bar mitzvah, I always recommend that they talk to a Holocaust survivor.
Yeah, that was someone's mitzvah thing.
Yeah,
They held that at the synagogue.
it's great. Yeah.
Have you ever questioned your beliefs in God or ever while being a rabbi?
Yeah, I haven't questioned, is there a God? But it's kind of a Jewish obligation to question. The name Israel, we are people of Israel. Yisrael, Israel means those who wrestle with God. So it's good to question. It's healthy to question. Question why and how and when. And there's a great quote by a rabbi named Kushner, who said, when I pray, I talk to God. When I study Torah, God talks to me. So we have text. We have, again, 72 volumes of Talmud. If you want to argue with God, there's plenty of God to argue back. It's a very healthy thing to do. It builds character and strength. What other questions?
Did you show the prayer shawl?
No, I didn't show the prayer shawl. Volunteers? Anyone? Coming up.
I don't have time, actually, but
Yeah, come on up. We'll do this quickly. So in addition to the yarmulke, Jews wear prayer shawls. Oh, hold on to. Yeah, it's okay. We are covered when we pray, and if you're wearing it in a prayer style, then it would look something like this. And this. You're officially Jewish now. Just kidding. So as Jews, we wrap ourselves in a prayer shawl when we pray. A lot of times we do this when we read Torah. This prayer shawl is very functional, so take one end of it. So when Jews get married, it's under a chuppah like this. And the chuppah is made up of usually a big prayer shawl. When babies have their circumcision, their bris, they're usually wrapped in one of these. And a lot of times people are buried in their prayer shawls. Not this one, don't worry. But this is a talis, or a talit, and this is a talit gadol. Any ideas what gadol means? Means big. All right, thank you. It was wonderful learning with you guys.
Thank you.